Secrets of the Morning Forest. Martin finds solace in a forgotten corner of the world. Martin woke up early in the morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the small village room where he had spent the night. The faint scent of fresh morning air and damp earth lingered, carrying traces of the coolness from the night. He got out of bed and stretched, feeling his body gently loosen after a long rest. Everything around was quiet. No cars, no people, just the soft rustling of trees outside the window and the chirping of birds. He approached the window and gazed at the world beyond it. The village was wrapped in a soft morning mist that seemed reluctant to fade. Everything glistened with dew. Every tree and leaf appeared so alive, as if they, too, were waking up with him. Martin felt a strange sensation, as though time in this place slowed down, allowing every moment to be meaningful and significant. He took a deep breath of the fresh air that filled his lungs, feeling his heart calm. He wasn't sure what he was looking for on this journey. Perhaps answers to questions that had been troubling him for a long time, or maybe just a reprieve. Whatever it was, here, in this place, he felt lighter than ever before. Once he shook off the lingering traces of sleep, Martin descended to a small kitchen where breakfast awaited him. There, amid old wooden tables and simple yet cozy details, he found a sense of true tranquility. Sitting at the table, sipping warm tea, he observed the world awakening outside. The sounds of the village were soft, footsteps echoing faintly, birds singing, and leaves rustling. The scene reminded him of an old, cherished book where he wasn't just a reader but part of the peaceful world within. Suddenly, the elderly host of the house approached him and said, "What a wonderful day, isn't it? Nature never rushes. Everything happens in its own time." These words, spoken with such gentleness, resonated as truth. Martin reflected. He realized that time here flowed differently. There was none of the tension and haste that had characterized his earlier life. He felt there was something far more important in this world: peace and the ability to savor the moment. After breakfast, the old man suggested a walk in the forest. Martin agreed, and they set out, heading toward the woods. The path led through small fields covered in fresh grass and the edges of the forest, where sunlight filtered through the branches, creating golden beams on the ground. The forest was truly magical. Its shade offered easy breathing, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and freshness. Each tree seemed alive, wise, and ancient, their moss-covered roots guarding the earth. Birds sang their songs, and it felt as though the entire forest reveled in the moment. Martin followed the old man, listening to his stories about life, nature, and time. These simple yet profound words seemed to overshadow all his previous worries. He began to understand how much time he had spent on things that didn't bring true fulfillment. In this forest, amidst the silence and peace, he felt that all he needed was to allow himself to simply be, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, just being here and now. They stopped at a small lake, its water so clear that it reflected the clouds and trees along the shore. Martin stood by the lake, feeling his body relax and his thoughts quiet down. He realized that here, amidst nature, he could find the inner peace he had been seeking for so long. "Do you see?" the old man asked, pointing to the lake. The water reflects everything around it, but the water remains calm, no matter what happens on its surface. So can we. We can stay calm within, even as the world around us changes. Martin pondered these words. He understood this was more than just a walk in the woods. It was something greater, a life lesson. All he needed was to learn how to be in harmony with himself and the world around him. He felt his tension melt away, leaving behind a sense of clarity and lightness. Sometimes, to hear yourself, you just need to stop and listen, the old man said, disappearing into the shade of the trees. And the forest is always ready to listen. Martin nodded. He realized that this forest had become something more than just a place. It was a sanctuary where he could rediscover himself. Immersed in this new world, he began to understand that this journey was not about finding something external. It was an inner journey, in search of the silence and peace he had been yearning for. As Martin and the old man continued their path through the forest, the air grew fresher, and each tree and bush seemed to tell its ancient story. The soft rustling of leaves and the scent of pine in the air created an elusive sense of calm, as though the forest itself shielded them from all that was unnecessary. Martin felt his mind freeing itself from thoughts, and his body relaxing with every step. "Slowly, don't rush," the old man said when he noticed Martin quickening his pace. "There's no hurry in the forest. It teaches us to be here, now." Martin slowed his steps, glancing at the old man. The elder's face was serene, his eyes clear. His words were like a gentle river, flowing smoothly yet leaving a profound mark on the soul. They walked on, eventually reaching an ancient oak tree standing in the middle of a clearing. Its massive branches spread like open arms, and its leaves seemed to whisper their timeless secrets. The old man stopped and invited Martin to sit beneath the tree. "Here, under this oak, you can feel the strength of the earth. It remembers many years, many cycles of seasons. You can sense how its roots connect it to the depths of the earth. And so are we, people. Our roots stretch far into the past, but it's important not to forget that we are a part of this world, just like this oak." Martin sat on the soft grass, leaning against the tree's trunk. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His thoughts gradually began to quiet, as if they were dissolving in this green ocean of tranquility. He felt his consciousness calming down and his body becoming light and free. Sometimes we need to return to our roots to understand who we truly are, the old man continued, sitting nearby. "We're used to the noise and rush, but here, in silence, we can hear the most important things." Martin said nothing. He didn't know what to say. His mind was filled with the realization that here, under this oak, he could truly feel how his life, his story, was part of something greater. With each breath, he felt his body calming further. It wasn't just relaxation. It was a sense of deep harmony, as though everything he had ever experienced was necessary to bring him to this moment. And now, here, he understood that nothing in his life had been accidental. Every step, every choice, every moment had led him here. After several minutes of absolute silence, the old man spoke again. "Here, words are unnecessary, Martin. Time isn't something we can measure with clocks and calendars. Time is what we feel within ourselves." Martin opened his eyes and looked at the old man. His face was serene, his gaze filled with wisdom Martin could only guess at. I always thought time was just something that slips away, something we lose, he said, as if unsure why he was saying it. Time doesn't slip away, the old man replied. It's always with us, and it depends on how we perceive it. Have you ever noticed how time flies when you're truly in the moment, simply living? When you let yourself just be? Martin thought about it. He remembered days from his youth when time felt slow, and every moment was filled with energy. Somehow, as he aged, time had started to feel rigid, compressed, each day monotonous and repetitive. But here, in the forest, he felt everything slowing down. It was as if time had become soft, gently enveloping him. He gazed at the surrounding nature, the soft light playing on the leaves, the quiet movement of clouds across the sky. The forest felt alive, as if every plant, every tree, was sharing its silence and peace with him. "Do you hear it?" the old man asked, breaking the silence. Silence is also music. Sometimes the deepest harmony comes not from sounds, but from their absence. Martin nodded, unable to utter a word. He just sat there, fully immersed in the moment. It felt as though his entire life, his history, the hustle, and the noise, had vanished, leaving only this moment, a moment of presence. He felt his body and mind begin to dissolve into the silence, as if he were becoming a part of the world itself. Immersed in the quiet, Martin sat beneath the oak tree, and it seemed as though the forest itself held its breath, waiting for him to understand something profound. Time felt irrelevant. It stretched and flowed like a boundless, ever-moving river in which one could never drown. In this silence, there was no past, no future, only the here and now. Have you ever thought that silence and sound are two sides of the same coin? The old man broke the stillness, his voice as quiet and steady as ever. Martin pondered, his gaze wandering over the treetops and the soft light filtering through the leaves. He had never considered such things. His life had always been filled with noise, busyness, and obligations. But here, amidst these ancient trees, he felt something deep within his soul begin to shift and reshape. "Are you saying that silence isn't the absence of sound?" he asked. "Exactly. It's the space where all sounds are born. Silence isn't emptiness. It's the very foundation, the basis of everything. Like the night before dawn, when everything seems dark and quiet. But it's in that silence that a new day begins to awaken." Martin looked at the old man, whose eyes shone with a quiet wisdom, like distant lights visible in the night. He realized the old man was speaking of something far deeper. Sound, like silence, was part of a greater whole, and in silence, one could find answers that never came amid noise. Feeling his mind grow a little clearer, Martin rose and followed the old man, who had already begun moving slowly along the path. The forest grew even more mysterious, its shadows now appearing soft and inviting, not frightening. The shadows gave a sense of protection, of comfort, as if the forest itself was wrapping around him and the old man, shielding them from the outside world. "Martin, what do you think about time?" the old man continued, as if unaware of the profound depth his question required. We humans tend to see time as something rigid, something to be measured. Clocks, calendars, all of it seems so important because we live in a world structured that way. But isn't it strange that, in truth, time doesn't exist? All we really have is this moment. You've just realized that time isn't something that ticks, it's something that lives within you. Martin looked at the old man and involuntarily smiled. There was something in his words that made him forget all his worries, as if he had finally found the key note in life that answered all his questions. Then what if we stop thinking of time as something that slips away? What if we start seeing it as something infinite? Martin asked. You're on the right track, my boy. Time isn't something that fades. It exists in every breath, every step, every glance. We can't stop it, but we can live within it. And that's the most important part. When you begin to live in the moment, when you understand that every instant is a whole world. With these words, the old man led him further down the path, and they soon arrived at a small stream gently murmuring among the stones. The water sparkled under the sun's rays, and its sound was so calming that it seemed as though the entire world flowed into this tender stream. Martin sat on a stone by the water, his gaze captured by the sunlight reflected on its clear surface. Have you ever listened to the sounds of water? The old man asked, sitting beside him. Each sound of the water is unique. No two are the same. Water always flows differently, but with the same purpose, to find its path. So do we. Despite all obstacles, we always find our way, even if it seems difficult and thorny. Martin closed his eyes and listened. He heard the water splashing against the rocks, creating smooth, rhythmic sounds akin to breathing, deep and soothing. Each sound was like a tiny world, born and fading away. And that world was part of him, and of everyone near it. I never thought simple things could be so profound, Martin said softly. All great truths are hidden in simplicity, the old man replied. You feel it, and you're learning to find it within yourself. Martin gazed at the stream, and with each breath, his mind grew clearer. He began to understand that his journey wasn't just a walk through the forest. It was a journey inward, toward his inner world, toward finding peace and harmony even in the simplest moments of life. After spending some time near the stream, the old man and Martin rose again and began to move forward. The forest grew denser, and the shadows of the trees stretched out, creating the strange sensation that the space around them was becoming narrower and more intimate. Have you ever noticed how every step in the forest can sound different? The old man asked, his voice still gentle but attentive, as if he were waiting for Martin to realize something important. Martin glanced at the path they were walking. He noticed that each step on the soft ground sounded different. Dry twigs crackled beneath his feet in some places, while in others, the earth absorbed the sound, rendering it almost weightless. Everything changes here, old man, he said. Every step feels different, depending on where you tread. Just like in life, the old man replied with a slight smile. Every step in it is also a choice, leading you down a different path. What's important isn't what you choose, but how you perceive the journey. It always leads to something significant. Some time passed, and faint lights began to appear on the horizon, as if someone were lighting small torches. Martin slowed his steps, unable to look away from the lights breaking through the forest darkness. It was a strange sight. The lights burned without moving closer to each other, yet they created the feeling that the entire forest lived its own mysterious rhythm. "What are those lights?" Martin asked, unable to hide his curiosity. The old man glanced toward the lights, his face becoming serious, but with a soft, barely noticeable expression of reverence. "They are the light of ancient stars. These lights remind us that light always exists, even if we cannot see it immediately. When you seek light in the darkness, it is always nearby. It may not be as bright as you expected, but it is always present." Martin felt these words touch something deep inside him. He thought about how, throughout his life, he often searched for light, hoping it would be bright and obvious. But the old man reminded him that sometimes light comes quietly, subtly, and that it's important to learn to see it even in the darkest places. They continued walking, and soon the lights grew brighter. The path led them to a small clearing, at the center of which stood a stone circle. Around the circle burned small candles, their flames flickering in the night, creating a thrilling sense of silence and sacred presence. "This is a place of power," the old man said, stepping toward the circle. "Here, all the elements converge. Earth, fire, water, air. They are all here, teaching us balance. We humans often forget how important it is to be in harmony with the world around us. But this place will remind you that everything happening to you is part of something much greater." Martin approached the stones surrounding the circle. His fingers gently touched the cold surface of one of the stones, and he felt a barely perceptible vibration emanating from it. It was more than just a stone. It felt like time stopped in this place, and everything became one. "Have you ever thought about what balance is?" the old man asked, observing Martin as he touched the stone. "Balance," Martin repeated, trying to grasp the true meaning of the word. He felt something inside him begin to change, as if answers to questions about his life and the world were gradually revealing themselves. "Balance is not just equilibrium," the old man said, continuing to watch Martin. "It's acceptance. Acceptance that both light and shadow are not opposites. Together, they create harmony. In your life, too, there are moments of light and shadow, and it's important to learn to see that each side is valuable. Only then can you move forward with an open heart." Martin closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He felt his body once again fill with calmness, while thoughts that once seemed so important began to dissolve into the moment. He was here, in this place, with this old man, and he felt that his life, despite all its complexities, could also be part of this harmony. He opened his eyes and saw the old man smiling, his face softly illuminated by the candlelight. "You're starting to understand, Martin. This is all a journey to yourself. All you need is to be here and now, to feel your connection to the world and to who you are." The mist was especially dense that night. It wrapped around the ground in soft layers, making it seem like the whole world was submerged in this milky ocean. Martin and the old man continued their path, despite the damp chill in the air. The wind, quiet and subtle, slipped through the branches of the trees, creating a soft, almost imperceptible rustling in the leaves. "The wind always brings change, Martin," the old man said, his voice like a whisper of the very wind. You can't see it, but you can feel its presence. It touches your face gently, changes direction, moves the clouds, and brings a new atmosphere. In life, changes often don't happen all at once. They aren't always noticeable on the surface, but they are always with us. Martin listened to the whisper of the wind again. He felt his hair lightly stirred, and the slight chill the wind carried seemed like a touch to his very being. He reflected on the old man's words. Sometimes, changes in life feel so insignificant that it's hard to believe they can form the foundation for something great. But how can we recognize these changes? Martin asked. Sometimes it feels like nothing is changing, even when I try to be mindful. That is the key thought, Martin, the old man replied. Change doesn't always happen on the outside. It starts inside. Often, what changes within you manifests in the world around you. When you shift your perception, when you begin to see things differently, you start to notice the changes. They're always there. You just need to learn to see them. They walked further along the path, and Martin felt his perspective slowly shifting. He began to look at the world with greater attention, as if every step, every tree, every sound could be part of something more significant. After some time, they found themselves on a small hill overlooking a valley below. Around the hill stood ancient stones covered in moss, their surfaces marked by time and history. Below, in the distance, Martin could see the flickering of lights, as if someone was lighting torches on the horizon once again. Look, Martin, the old man said, pointing to the lights in the valley. Those are the same lights you saw before. They'll always be there, burning, regardless of how you perceive them. These lights are a symbol of your path. No matter how far you walk, they'll always be ahead, reminding you that light exists even when you can't see it. Martin watched the lights silently, his heart filled with quiet understanding. He realized that light didn't need to be bright and visible at every moment of his life. But it was there. It existed, even if he wasn't always able to recognize it. How did you learn to be at peace with yourself? Martin asked, turning to the old man. He felt the old man held knowledge that could change his life, but he wasn't sure how to phrase the question. The old man smiled, his face calm and confident. Harmony isn't a destination, Martin. It's a process. It's like the sound you create when playing a musical instrument. You can't force music to sound a certain way, but you can learn to listen. And the more you listen, the easier it becomes to follow the music when it begins. Martin looked at the old man, and his face lit up with an inner glow. He began to understand that true harmony was about learning to hear his own thoughts, feelings, and inner needs. It wasn't a final goal, but a process of accepting everything that happens and moving forward, despite the fog or the storm. So, maybe all I need to do is just listen? Martin asked with a gentle smile. Yes, the old man nodded. And remember, even when you hear nothing, it doesn't mean there is no sound. Everything that happens has its meaning. Just listen. Martin took a deep breath. He felt his body relax, and his inner world calm down. This journey, with all its mysteries and challenges, was the very process he had been seeking. And how will I know I'm on the right path? Martin asked. The old man looked at him warmly, but there was something inexplicably deep in his gaze. You're already on the path, Martin. You just need to remember that every step matters. Even if you can't see the road, even if it feels difficult, every step is part of your journey. Martin felt the sky above him brighten slightly, and he realized that on this hill, he had rediscovered his balance. He was ready to continue his journey, knowing that even if he couldn't see all the lights, they would always burn somewhere ahead. After a night filled with starlit skies and mist, the morning arrived softly. Martin and the old man rose early, and the forest looked entirely different. Sunbeams pierced through the damp foliage, scattering rays of light across the ground, and every tree and bush seemed wrapped in golden light. The mist was gradually dissipating, and the air felt fresh and cool. "We're heading to a place where answers can be found," the old man said, gently tapping his staff on the ground. His voice was calm, yet the moment felt significant. Martin, feeling a slight unease, couldn't help but ask, "What answers do you mean?" The old man looked at him with a smirk, but his eyes held more understanding than mere curiosity. "A place where silence becomes clear. A place where you'll learn to listen not just to the outside world, but also to the one within you." They continued walking along the forest path, and with every step, Martin felt his body beginning to relax. He found that something in his life was starting to change. There was no more anxiety, no tension like before when he sought answers in the outside world. Instead, he began to feel that the answers were already inside him, simply hidden until he learned to hear them. "Have you ever thought that silence can be a powerful tool?" the old man asked when they stopped on a small hill overlooking a quiet valley. "Silence," Martin said, surprised. "But how can it be a tool?" "Silence isn't just the absence of sound, Martin," the old man said, noting how the forest seemed engulfed in this soft, profound stillness. "It's a space created to hear something important. The outside world is always filled with noise, and we often lose the ability to hear ourselves, our true desires and needs. Silence helps us focus. It opens doors to what we often ignore." Martin pondered his words. He looked at the quiet valley below, where even the wind seemed barely noticeable. There was something magical about this silence, as if it could unveil the essence of his thoughts and feelings. "But how can I learn to listen to the silence?" he asked, feeling that this challenge had become part of his journey. The old man smiled. "You're already starting. Silence isn't something you need to search for. It's always there, in every moment. You just need to allow yourself to feel it. When you learn to dwell in silence, you'll begin to hear everything that's been hidden." Martin realized there was something profound in these words. He kept gazing at the misty valley, and gradually a sense arose that the whole world, here and now, was filled with an unimaginable silence that spoke more than the loudest words. "Listening to silence, it's like listening to your heart, isn't it?" Martin said, feeling he was finding the right words. "Yes," the old man confirmed. "Silence is the space for your heart to speak. All the answers are already inside you. We're just often too busy to hear them." They sat in silence, and Martin felt his thoughts quieting, his emotions filling him with every breath. In that moment, he realized that the journey he had begun was not just a search of the outer world, but also a journey within himself. He began to understand that true light wasn't always bright and visible. Sometimes, light was the quiet feeling of inner peace that could come only when he learned to listen to the silence. The old man looked at him, his eyes full of knowledge. "You'll learn not to fear this silence, Martin. It doesn't scare those who understand it. It's the path to inner harmony." Martin felt his heart beat more steadily, his breathing deepen. He no longer felt anxious. There was no rush or restless thoughts. He was here, in this place, in this moment, and silence had become his companion. "Are you ready for the next step?" the old man asked, his voice gentle yet imbued with a presence of strength, as if he knew Martin was ready to go through something important. Martin nodded, feeling that, in this moment, he was ready. Ready to be here, ready to listen, and open to new opportunities that awaited him. The morning was clear and warm, and with every step into the forest, the air grew richer. A gentle breeze brushed his face, and the shadows of the trees danced on the ground in rhythm with his movements. At that moment, Martin began to feel that the forest was becoming more than just a place where he sought answers. It was something more meaningful. It was a space he could call his own. Every tree, every stone, every step on the earth felt like part of his personal journey. "Today, you'll learn what it means to leave traces, Martin," the old man said as he walked along the forest path. His steps were light and confident, as if he knew every path led somewhere important. Martin looked at the old man, not immediately understanding what he meant. "What does it mean to leave traces?" he asked. The old man stopped and turned to him. His eyes held a gentle wisdom, as if he had seen much more than he could express in words. "Each of us leaves traces on our path, even if we don't always realize it. Every step you take, every word you speak, every choice you make, they are traces you leave in the world. You can walk the path without noticing these traces, or you can learn to see them, understanding that each one has meaning." Martin was a bit surprised, but felt the old man was speaking about something very important. He looked down at the ground and noticed how his own footsteps left faint impressions in the sand at the forest's edge. He thought about how many such traces he had left in his life, and what each of them might mean. "But traces disappear," he said, pondering. "Soon, they'll vanish, and no one will see them." The old man smiled softly. "Yes, your traces may fade with time, but that doesn't mean they didn't matter. They were there so that you could walk this path, and that in itself is valuable." Martin silently stared at his footprints. He realized that it didn't matter who saw the traces he left in life. What mattered was that he saw them himself and understood their significance. He began to feel that every action he took, even the smallest, was important to his journey. "I often feel like my traces fade too quickly," Martin said as he climbed a small hill. "No matter how hard I try, it seems like everything I do loses its meaning over time." The old man stopped and looked at him with surprising clarity. "But do you know, Martin, that the most important traces aren't always visible? There are traces left by your soul, your heart. They don't fade with time. They remain in the people you meet, in what you give to the world, in how you live." These words resonated deeply in Martin's heart. He understood that true traces weren't the ones that left a physical mark on the ground, but those left in the hearts of others and in his own life. "How can we be sure that our traces truly matter?" Martin asked, unable to hide his doubt. "You can't always be sure," the old man replied. "But the most important part of the journey is to walk it without expecting immediate results. It's not about how long your traces last, but how they affect the world. It may not always be obvious, but everything you do with kindness and honesty leaves traces that never disappear." They continued walking, and Martin became increasingly aware that the world was much more complex than he had once thought. He began to notice how every action, every word, every glance left traces in the surrounding world. But most importantly, he realized these traces mattered because they made him part of something greater. "How can I become someone who leaves the brightest and deepest traces?" Martin asked, his voice becoming more resolute. The old man thought for a moment before answering. "You're already on that path, Martin. Just don't forget that every trace begins in your heart. When you act with love and respect, you leave traces that never disappear. The most important trace is the one you leave within yourself." Martin realized that his journey was far more meaningful than he had thought. He wasn't just a traveler passing through the world. He was part of it, his traces already present in his actions and what he created around him. And although he couldn't see all the consequences of his steps, he began to understand that they mattered nonetheless. Days passed since Martin had started to grasp the importance of the traces he left behind. The forest became more familiar, as if his steps were beginning to echo in harmony with the rhythm of nature. Ahead lay an even greater lesson, a lesson about time, its passage, and how it changes everything around us and within us. "Martin, have you ever thought about how time changes everything we love?" the old man asked as they approached a small river flowing through the forest. The water moved calmly, smoothly, and in its reflection, one could see clouds drifting across the sky. Martin looked at the river, where the water seemed never to stop yet was always in motion, like life itself, continuing its course. "Time. It always changes everything, doesn't it?" Martin said, feeling how this question became essential to his journey. "It seems like nothing stays the same." The old man stepped to the river and sat on a rock at its edge. "Time does change many things, Martin, but it's important to understand that it's not just a process of destruction. Time is also a process of transformation. Like the water in the river, it can be calm, it can be turbulent, but it always moves forward, no matter what." Martin sat down next to him, watching the water. He realized that the river didn't resist time. It embraced it, and in that acceptance, there was no fear, only peace and wisdom. "The water never tries to fight the current," the old man continued. "So it is with life. We often try to stop time, to halt change. But if we accept it as the river does, we'll move forward with ease and without resistance." Martin felt these words sink deeper into his mind. He had always thought of time as an enemy, something he had to defeat, slow down, or control. But now, watching the river, he understood it wasn't an enemy. Time was an inevitable flow, and if one learned to understand it, one could live in harmony with it. And what should one do when time feels too fast or too slow? Martin asked, still pondering the thought. The old man smiled, his gaze calm and wise. "Time will move as it needs to, but your task is to learn how to be in the moment. If you can live in the present, in what is happening right now, time will become your ally." It won't oppress you or cause anxiety. It will be your companion. Martin looked at the old man with curiosity. How can I learn to be in the present? It's hard to explain with words, but you've already taken the first step, Martin, the old man said. You've started to realize that time is not an enemy but a part of life. You've begun to let go of the past and stop clinging to the future. You are living here and now, and that's the most important thing. They sat in silence, listening to the sound of water, which seemed particularly loud in the stillness. Martin felt his body relax and his thoughts grow clearer. He realized his whole life had been an attempt to control everything around him, including time. But now, he was beginning to understand that it's better to go with the flow. The stillness of water, the stillness of time. Martin murmured, almost to himself, time is not an enemy. It just is, and we must learn to live in harmony with it. The old man nodded. You've understood it correctly. Time will move on, regardless of what you think of it. But if you learn to be in harmony with it, you will feel it as something alive, as a part of your life. Martin felt the words sinking deeper into his mind. He realized his life had not been a constant battle against time, but a search for how to live with it as a friend rather than an enemy. In this calm acceptance, he sensed a profound strength. We'll continue our journey, the old man said, rising from the stone. But now you know that time is not something to fear. It's something to understand and embrace. Martin stood beside him, and they continued walking along the river, feeling time's inevitable flow and the importance of learning to live within it. As Martin accepted the value of time and learned to treat it as a friend, not an adversary, their path led them to an even more mysterious and enigmatic place. The journey grew harder, and nature became more majestic. When they left the shadows of the forest, they found themselves at the edge of a vast desert covered in fine golden sand that shimmered under the sun. The desert, the old man said as they stood at its edge. A place where life and death meet in a dance. A place where every step demands wisdom and patience. Are you ready to understand its secrets? Martin gazed at the horizon where the earth met the sky, and the sand stretched endlessly. The desert. I've always thought of it as a place of death, that there's no life here. The old man chuckled softly. Yes, many think so. But in truth, the desert is a place where life reveals itself differently. It's a place where everything seems impossible, yet everything is possible. Here, you must learn to see what cannot be seen and feel what cannot be touched. Martin looked again at the endless sands. He felt the grains begin to seep into his boots, and every movement in this space seemed more deliberate, as if the desert demanded his attention and understanding. How can I learn to see what is unseen? He asked. The old man began walking on the sand, leaving footprints that the gentle wind quickly erased. You won't see it right away, but if you listen, if you walk slowly and attentively, you will sense the desert come alive in its own way. As they walked along a sand dune, Martin began to notice that, despite the apparent emptiness, there was life here. Somewhere far off, in the depths of the sands, he saw strange silhouettes of animals moving with extraordinary grace. At times, he heard the soft rustling of the wind, carrying whispers of ancient wisdom. Everything here happens in a rhythm, you must learn to align with," the old man continued. "The sand hides not just emptiness, but an abundance of life that exists on other levels. You see only the surface, but if you pay closer attention, you'll witness life flourishing in the most unexpected places." Martin stopped and closed his eyes, trying to tune into this unseen world. The wind, which had seemed empty and lifeless, suddenly filled his consciousness. He began to sense hidden traces, imprints of creatures he hadn't noticed before. They were everywhere, in every grain of sand, every gust of wind, every step they took. "Have you ever noticed how the desert changes its face?" the old man asked. "When the sun is high, it seems lifeless. But when it sets, when night falls, it becomes a place of silence and creation. All living things come out." Martin nodded, realizing the desert, like life, requires a special kind of perception, patience, attention, and respect for the unseen parts of the world. The desert isn't just an empty space. It hides its life and its history. The old man smiled. "You're starting to understand. The desert, like life, is a place where everything finds its place, even when it seems impossible. You're learning not just to survive but to live, to find life in places others overlook." Martin felt something change within him. He began to see the desert not as a hostile place, but as a space filled with deep wisdom. Every step, every glance, every moment demanded more attention. He realized that here, in this desert, he could learn patience and respect for the world. "I'm starting to understand that life isn't always what we see on the surface," Martin said, gazing at a sand dune that seemed to hold long-forgotten secrets. "Exactly," the old man replied, his eyes shining like two flames in the night. "But to understand it, you must learn to listen, to feel it. In the desert, you hear only what truly matters. There is no excess noise, just the pure sound of what's important." They continued their journey through the desert, and with every step, Martin felt his consciousness expanding as he began to understand the world in his own rhythm. He was learning not just to pass by, but to live in each moment, to feel every breath, every step, every change in the desert. After Martin and the old man crossed the endless sands of the desert, their path led them to a high hill. From the top, a magnificent view of the surrounding lands opened up, and the sky seemed within reach. The evening twilight kindled a fire on the horizon, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and purple. The sun sank below the horizon, and the cold night began to descend. "Look," said the old man, pointing to the sky, which was gradually filling with stars. "This is another important place. Here, you will see what is hidden from the eyes during the day. You will learn to read the sky like a book, in which the story of all living things is written." Martin looked up. The stars began to appear, one by one, their light seeming soft and soothing. He had never thought of stars as anything more than mere dots in the sky, but now he understood they were symbols to be understood. "Stars have always seemed distant and unattainable to me," Martin said, feeling a change within, "as if they look down on us from above, with no connection to what happens on earth." "You are right, Martin," the old man replied. "Stars may seem so far away, so foreign, but if you pay attention, You will understand that they are connected to you with every step you take. The stars are the memory of the universe. They hold knowledge that you can understand if you listen. Martin felt his focus settle on the stars, as if they were whispering something to him that he had never noticed before. He felt the world around him start to fade away, leaving only the light in the sky and the quiet harmony that enveloped his consciousness. "What can they tell me?" Martin asked. "The stars speak of infinity, Martin," the old man said. "They remind you that you are part of something much larger than yourself. They tell you that you are not alone. Even when it seems like you walk the path alone, you are always surrounded by those who came before you and those who will come after you. You are part of an eternal cycle." Martin sat in silence, gazing at the stars, and his thoughts slowly began to drift in different directions. He began to feel a connection with this endless world, as if each breath of his was in unison with the universe. He understood that his whole life was not just the path of one person, but part of a great stream that goes on forever, like the light of these distant stars. "I always thought stars were just light we see in the night sky," Martin said. "But now I realize they symbolize something much deeper." "Yes," said the old man. "Each star is not just a point of light. It is a story that can be understood if we listen to ourselves. Each of us carries our own star, our own glow. But it is important to remember that the stars in the sky remind us of our place in this vast universe." Martin felt his view of the world changing. He began to understand that everything he did was important, but it was also important to realize there was something bigger than himself. He was only a part of the whole, part of a huge picture that encompassed all infinity. "I am not alone," Martin whispered, as if trying to convince himself of this. "No, you are not alone," the old man replied. "You will always be part of something great. When you look at the stars, remember that you are not alone. You are connected to those who came before you and those who will come after you." Martin looked at the old man, feeling how his inner world was filled with peace. He realized that many of his worries and fears were connected to loneliness, the feeling that he had to prove something. But now he understood that he didn't have to always be in search. He was part of something bigger that had always supported him. "I am beginning to understand," he said, looking at the stars again. "My life is not just my path. It's a path we all walk together. We are all connected, even if we don't see it." The old man smiled and stood up. "Yes, Martin, you are beginning to see, and that opens your eyes to things that were hidden before." They continued to gaze at the stars, and Martin felt how the world around him became clearer, how his place in it became understandable and important. He was ready to continue his journey, knowing that he was not alone. And perhaps this realization was the very light he had been searching for. Martin and the old man continued their journey through the nightlands, where the stars still shone, but now something had changed in their hearts and minds. Martin felt how these changes began to reflect in his actions. He was no longer just a seeker. He had become a more conscious traveler, ready to perceive the world not as a series of random events, but as a series of lessons and revelations unfolding as he walked his path. A few days later, they arrived at a new scene, a forest, but it was not at all what he had imagined. It was a place where the winds merged, creating musical notes, and the trees were so large and majestic that their crowns hid the sky like the vault of an ancient temple. "What is this place?" Martin asked, admiring the enormous trees. "This is the forest of change," the old man replied, stopping and looking around. "Here, the wind brings answers to questions we don't know. In this forest, everything changes with every gust of wind. It will help you see changes you didn't notice before." Martin felt a light unease, but at the same time, excitement. He had always thought of change as something heavy and frightening, something that brought suffering and uncertainty. But here, in this forest, there was something different. The wind was soft and calm, as if it were a friend offering answers if one was willing to listen. They continued walking, and with every step, Martin felt how his body and mind began to merge with this place. He could hear the branches moving as if someone had begun whispering in his ear, but the whisper was pleasant, even soothing. "This forest," continued the old man, "helps people understand that change is not necessarily something scary. It is part of life. We all change, and it is important to learn to accept these changes with gratitude." Martin thought about it.